Hi ihr Lieben und willkommen zurück zu der neuesten Smack-Folge. Wenn euch die Folge gefällt, lasst uns gerne einen Daumen hoch da und teilt uns eure Meinung in den Kommentaren mit. Danke und viel Spaß.
Hi, this is Christoph. Welcome to my Smack episode.
Hi everybody, I'm Philip Ibrahim. Welcome to our newest episode of Smack. Today I'm here with Christoph Hoffmann, who is not only the founder of 25 hours, he is as well a great guy and absolute expert for wine. He tells us why it's important to differentiate between architecture and interior, and how he met the lead guitarist of a band called Schweusfuß. Enjoy the show. Christoph, first and foremost, there's a funny joke by starting this podcast because my fellow colleagues always make fun that I don't speak English. So this is really my premiere in English, which is funny because I speak English literally the whole day, but they all pretend that I cannot speak English. So it's good that you keep on correcting me whenever something happens so that the boys have enough to laugh back there. I'm super pleased to have Christoph Hoffmann here today with me on Smack. I'm a big fan, so welcome to Smack.
Thank you. I look forward to our conversation. Until 2 minutes ago, I thought we would do that in Swabian, but now we have to speak English. So,
yeah. For the fans, to cut that already short, as everybody is quite aware, I'm a born Swabian. I'm born in Stuttgart. I'm a VfB Stuttgart supporter since lifetime. And Christoph is from Reutlingen. And here's the fun fact: I'm from Reutlingen too. So that's already very good. We can switch to Swabian whenever we're ready, whenever the audience is ready. Yeah, but you left Reutlingen quite a while ago, right?
Well, I'm a bit older than you, Philip. So 57, I left Reutlingen when I was 21. I was a bit older when I made my Abitur. I screwed up a couple of times in my school time career, and I almost ended up being in Pfullingen until today because my first job while I was still in school, I sneaked away in the afternoon and I was running a French wine shop called Der Gallier back then. It was like a French wine concept. So every day after school, I went to that shop, and it was actually my first entrepreneurship. And it was really difficult for me to leave because I loved that job so much that my parents had to really
drag you out,
get me out of this place because I made 800 Deutschmark a month. I met a lot of great people, and actually a very famous Swabian musician back then. I don't know if you remember the band Schweusfuß, and the guitar player of Schweusfuß, Didi. He was one of my favorite customers. He came every day to buy wine, and when I told him that I had to leave, he took over, and he had this shop until 1 year ago, until he went into retirement. So
no way.
Maybe that would have been my career if my parents wouldn't have dragged me out of this shop in Pfullingen. Yeah,
that's a very amazing story because I was about to ask, is that shop still there? But apparently, until last year, that's quite a while.
Didi moved like I don't know, 20 years ago to Reutlingen, close to where I grew up. And they still sell great French wine. So I still go and buy my wine there when I go and see my mother. And then I smuggle the wine into Switzerland because it's much less expensive in Reutlingen because I'm Swabian, you know. But anyways,
great. I might. It's funny because you say, for me it was totally normal. You say Schweusfuß. That's the name of the band. But
yes.
to explain what this means, it means like sweaty feet or stinky feet. So that's the name of the band, which is actually even more fun if you explain it in English. I have to say because it's very traditional. Well, that's great. So I read out of that you started drinking wine quite early. So has that been a passion ever since?
Yes, I became addicted when I was 17, 18, I would say. I mean, I don't know. But no, I loved it back then. And I also loved, besides the wine, I loved the being a host because my main job was, of course, to sell wine. And I think I always loved and I experienced back then in that small town that I'm pretty good in selling things and that I was having really a lot of fun and passion about hosting people. I was excited about every customer entering the place, and so it was maybe my first experience in becoming a host. Yeah.
That's amazing. Was that a bit as well the start in, or the reasoning why you went into hospitality? Was that the reason?
Well, looking back at it, you always create your own narrative when you look back at what you have done, and of course you try to optimize a little bit. But yes, I think it was at least one step which made me aware that this path would be the right path for me. I made a lot of detours after, and I screwed up a couple of times, of course, but I always stick to that people business and to connecting people, and of course trying to sell something to people, but not for the sake of selling something to people. I strongly believe that if you sell something, you also do something good to people, or that's the ideal case of selling something. It's a give and take at the end of the day, and that's what I learned by selling wine and creating nice Saturdays, because on Saturday there was always like a wine tasting together with baguette and cheese and salami and stuff like that.
French.
And that was a nice Saturday where I met a lot of interesting people.
It's super funny and super authentic, because I really feel, the connection into what you built later, which we will tap on later on, because selling an experience is what you just described. It's less about, of course, we have to make a living, but making people help to have a good time by whatever they need to make that time amazing. That's a bit what you describe as well as great hostmanship. And I like the thought about that wine background, and I always think about the Krämerbrücke in Erfurt, where you have a couple of very, very small wineries, and when you come in summer, there's 2 chairs outside, and there's always people sitting there with a wine and chatting and creating a very, very unique atmosphere. So I really can relate to that. That's amazing. Hey, and then you left the warm and cozy Pfullingen, which, by the way, back then, as well in my time, the only reason to go to Pfullingen is because they had the only 24 hours McDonald's. So what was the wine for you was the McDonald's for us when we were young.
Okay, I didn't know.
In that region they closed. We did not have much back then. What should I say? And today the very famous Fritz Engelhardt has his hotel there. He just sold this year, so it's a very famous hotel. I would say in Baden-Württemberg as well. But then you left Reutlingen, and what was the next step then? Your parents dragged you out, but where did they send you?
Well, not too far away in the first step. I also had a strong tendency to stay at home. I was always on the Rockzipfel of my mother. I loved the good food and everything. And I started with an apprenticeship in Stuttgart, actually, working for a tour operator. So I became a Reiseverkehrskaufmann, as we call it in German, after 2.5 years of apprenticeship. And while I was doing that, I was in touch with an incoming agency in New York, which was owned back then by Hapag-Lloyd and DER. And I was almost to finish my apprenticeship, and I said, shit, what am I going to do now? And then I was intrigued by the idea to apply for a job at this company called New World Travel. It still exists. And I was lucky. It was a long procedure back then, also because of the visa. But they hired me, and so I took my first transatlantic flight on a Pan Am. I was upgraded to business class because I was a travel agent, and I was super proud of moving to New York. And after I got rid of my homesickness in the beginning, I got mugged 3 times. I started to love that city so much, and it really helped me also to understand what the world is about, and the international way and the craziness of New York.
That's unique. Yeah.
Yes, and the open-mindedness of people from all over the world. It was back in 1989, so it was a rough time in Manhattan, and that I think gave me a lot of energy and inspiration to move on. And we dealt a lot back then with hotels, because we were one of the biggest room night producers for the United States, and in particular for New York. And so I was in touch with a lot of hoteliers, and I, at some point after 2 or 3 years, I realized actually I was almost fired because we were in the midst of the first Gulf War. So my boss said, Christoph, we cannot afford you anymore. You either have to go to the Miami office of New World Travel, or we have to sack you. And then I said, thank you.
Let me guess, you said, oh no, Miami.
No, I said to myself, well, maybe it's the right time to get some more education, because until then I only had my apprenticeship and a very bad Abitur. So I said, well, let's go and see what I can do. And to me, it was clear to combine what I have done with hospitality. And I always loved Switzerland, because from Reutlingen it was not far away to go down skiing back then when I grew up. And so I decided to go to a Swiss hotel management school. And I did it was like a hotel management program for 2.5 years with part of Glion later. It was not Lausanne, but it was called Les Uns. It was in a very small village in the mountains. And I loved that time also to calm down from the New York time. And and that's where I learned a bit more about hospitality. From there, I went to Jerusalem, actually to a very famous hotel called the American Colony Hotel. It was on the Palestinian side, on the West Bank side of Jerusalem, managed by a famous Swiss management company, Gower Hotels back then. And from there, I moved to Hamburg, actually, and started working for Kempinski Hotels, for the Atlantic Hotel. And Atlantic was always, to me, one of those famous hotels. I read a book when I was a child called Gepäckschein 666, and it was based at the Atlantic Hotel, and it was the story of a young portier, of a young guy who was bringing in the luggage, a doorman, and about like a nice story about a small criminal case. And so I started with Kempinski, and that was the beginning actually of my career in hotels. I worked in sales and marketing, and I continued doing that for a number of years. My longest phase was at the Louis C. Jakob in Hamburg, also a well-known luxury hotel by the river Elbe. And at some point I realized I want to do something on my own. It was always a bit the dream of also my wife and myself. We never realized it, but to have our own.
How old were you when you were there? When you started realizing that dream, how old were you?
I was 32.
Wow.
It took a while until I found what I wanted to do, namely 25 hours. But I stopped working at the Louis C. Jakob, and I've tried to go my own way. And finally, in 2005, we founded 25 Hours. We means 3 business partners of mine, well known in the industry. Kai Hollmann, who is a very well-known hotelier in Hamburg. He has done Superbude, Gastwerk, the George. He was actually the one who started with the first 25 Hours hotel, plus R.D. Goldman, a very well-known, cool real estate developer from Frankfurt, who brought into the game the first real estate we developed into a 25 Hours hotel back then in Frankfurt. And last but not least, Stefan Gerhardt, who back then ran a very well-known hotel consulting firm called Treugast. He founded it as well. So I had 3 people who helped me a lot to get the know-how I needed to run the company. They were shareholders, and I was the managing director plus shareholder. So I grew up that company slowly but surely. And it was a very big success. And I'm still very surprised how well it worked.
First of all, I thank you for that insights. It's funny because there's a lot of similarities in our vita, even though you have decided much earlier to be much more successful than I am. But I like
I didn't decide it, but
you said you follow your dreams, which is amazing because you put the money where the mouth is, and you did exactly what you wanted to do. So that's probably as well good in terms of keeping and making goals, which I really, really admire. And the second thing is, 25 Hours has changed the perception of hotel industry. It has changed the way how I feel about hotels and how I consider hotels of tomorrow to be ready for I would say a changing set of customers, because whoever you bring in a 25 hours, you can find your spot. You know what I mean? It's not like it's not a one fits all thing, and you really can get rid of that loud bars in Berlin, or you can find a very quiet spot in Florence, which probably we can tap on later. So I'm really, really honored to get that info like a sponsor. That's why I'm asking as well. Hey, and then which one in Frankfurt was it? The Circle? No, which was the first one that
no,
you
the Gold.
did yourself?
Actually, it's the Goldman on Hanauer Landstraße. It's like a pretty rough street in the east end of Frankfurt. And Ardi was he was actually one of the people who created the East End with a lot of clubs and restaurants, and then he owned that little corner building on Hanau Landstraße, and that was the first hotel actually which I was able to develop. I negotiated a lease agreement with Ardi as the owner. And that's how I learned to do my first lease agreement. And I negotiated 100,000 euros for pre-opening budget. And with that pre-opening budget, I was looking around for people who I knew already before and who were stupid enough to work for me for almost nothing. Or, well, actually not stupid enough, because all the three who I found in the beginning worked with me until almost today. And they were like Henning Weiss, he was doing his apprenticeship at one of the hotels I worked last time. Michael, I found in a hotel school, such as Bruno, and they started working, and we had a very, very slim operation. The F&B was carved out because Ardi already said in the beginning, you guys don't know about F&B anyways. Hoteliers don't know what F&B is about. Let me do it on my own. And that was very helpful because he lost a lot of money in building up that restaurant.
He had to come back at one point.
And he did a very, very nice restaurant called the Goldman Restaurant. Ardi is not a very humble person when it comes to himself. He likes himself, which is good. And so he did a great restaurant, and we could focus only on the hotel operations. So that was our first hotel with 49 rooms. And there we started already with a little bit of storytelling. We had each room was supposed to tell the story of another person who Ardi knows very well from his network in Frankfurt. And that was how we started with the first hotel, and it became successful. We made money from the spot. We didn't have the typical ramp-up phase. And after we have successfully opened that hotel, we could focus on his next project, which was also a property by Ardi in Frankfurt. And with those hotels, plus Kai's Hotel in Hamburg, we were able to have a showcase. We were able to show off with other developers, and they became aware. They also realized that lifestyle segment of the business could be fairly interesting. We were
good timing,
focusing on a niche at the right time in Germany, and then we could move on. And we did. I think the next project was already in Vienna and Hamburg. I think that was fairly early. Hamburg was actually the next big thing we've done, and that's why we also decided at that point to create our little head office back then in Hamburg.
Amazing. Hey, when I hear that, for you, what if you if you decide today, what makes a hotel worth a visit? Because everything you said so far is really you. I can really relate to this individuality and the storytelling. Is that what makes it worth a visit for you?
Well, to me, worth visiting a hotel is to have a cool public space, something where you can find people who are interesting. For me, it's absolutely necessary to have a great bar, and of course, various interesting F&B spaces. And of course, on top of that, I would like to visit hotels which are not, boring, standardized hotels, but places where you can feel that people spend a lot of time on the narrative and, of course, on the design of the hotel and on the atmosphere. To me, the concept and the atmosphere as overall is, to me, much more important than the sheer design or the celebrity designer who did it probably.
I fully agree. So how long does it take you when you walk into a hotel to get that vibe thing? Is that something you see in the first 10, 12 seconds, or is that something you get with a full picture?
Yes, I can see it by the quality of the light. A lot of operators or designers or architects really fuck up the light. Sorry to use that word, to screw up the light or whatever. But
run an open gate. Yes.
If you see, I mean, you can see it already from the outside. If you are not able to really create an atmosphere which is inviting, which is warm, which is something which, you know, treats you in a positive manner, your soul and your emotions, and that has a lot to do with light, of course, in the first place. And then, of course, another layer or a lot of other layers come, such as the materials, the colors, also the experience you have while you walk through the space. I don't like hotels, for example, which are designed out of one piece. And that's why we started in a very early phase to strongly distinguish between architecture and interior design. To me, there's always the building and then there's the inside, especially the way we had to deal with hotels. Many times we had to take over existing buildings. Of course, it's always important to consider the building as such, the facade, the history of the building if it's not new build. But then you have to find some disruption between the architecture and what happens inside.
Interesting. And then you mentioned already the part F&D or F&B, food, and the experience that creates. At what point did that play a major role? Because if I think of 25 hours, that's literally like one of the first things that I think about is wherever I've been, I have had extremely enough alcohol, I would say, good drinks.
Well, we had a common understanding from the beginning, my partners and I, about F&B in hotels. Even though Ardi was quite disrespectful in a positive way about us hoteliers by saying hoteliers don't have a clue about F&B. But in a way, he's right. Of course, there's a lot of hoteliers who know a lot about F&B, but it's a different approach when you do a hotel restaurant than as if you do a restaurant, as a restaurateur, as an F&B guy, as the, mastermind of a very cool Italian restaurant in a city like Hamburg or Milano or elsewhere. If you have a hotel in the back, it always does something different with the gastronomy. So we also said to ourselves, we hate breakfast rooms. We don't like that history of having a breakfast room in a hotel and a hotel restaurant. So we said goodbye to those things in a very early stage. And we said, it's much better to hook up with local heroes. It's much better to hook up with something which creates its own profile as F&B. And in an early phase, I mean, in Frankfurt, we still work with very cool local heroes who supported us, who grew with us from the beginning. It's the Adidas brothers, and we have a very nice restaurant together with them. We had Thomas Haus for a very long time in Frankfurt with the Goldman restaurant, which was a very big success over a long period of time. Unfortunately, the pandemic didn't help Thomas to continue the business, but we're still doing fine with that hotel. But our biggest success came later with Neni. I met Haya and the family while I was creating the Viennese project, or while we were creating that hotel. So in the evening, I always went to the Nash market, and Haya had her first Neni restaurant there. And when we met,
I recommend to all the audience to go there. I've been there numerous times, and if it's a queue, just wait a couple of moments, you'll get a spot. It's amazing.
Yeah. And back then they only had that little restaurant, but you could already feel the passion, the heart of how much she put into the game. The boys were still young back then. She calls them the Burschen, Nouriel, Elior, Nadif, and Ilan. But she was like full power. And then I asked her if she would be interested to create the first Neni together with us in Berlin. And it took a while because they were busy with something else, but then we we started off with the Neni in Berlin, and it became a very big success. And now we have, I think, 7 restaurants together, and it's a very good example of how important and how helpful it can be to create an F&B brand with its own story behind and its own energy behind, and the energy is the family in this case.
And it's so authentic because, me as been in Berlin a long time haven't seen that, and being, I don't know how many times at the Neni, and then I haven't been as well in Vienna at the Neni, and in both locations now in Vienna, I have to say, and I don't know how many different ones I've seen. So it's really interesting to see how much you and 25 helped to grow their business, while at the same time they gave you like a symbiosis, an effort and a meaning in the hotel and the 25 hours hotels. But then you have still a lot of focus on the bars. So that came afterwards. So you dragged people in by the restaurants, and then you made sure that they stayed at the bar, right?
Yes, and the bar, I mean, again, you know, if you love bars, there are hotel bars, don't get me wrong, typical hotel bars, which are fabulous.
I agree.
Also in big hotels. It rarely happened. What did you say?
It's difficult. What? It's more difficult in a big hotel.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit of a cultural thing. I think you find more of the cool hotel bars in the States or in Asia, where it's more usual to go into a hotel to spend time in a bar. It was not cultural normal in Germany until then, unless you go to a very nice 5-star luxury hotel. The 4 Jahreszeiten always had a very
dressed.
Very
you don't come normal. Bar. You wear black suit and tie. And,
exactly. Or the Atlantic Hotel where I worked, the bar was also very attractive. Udo Lindenberg was there all the time when I was there, but it was always, like only the luxury, the very few luxury hotels which were able to create a bar which was nice by itself. But our aim was to do something else, especially with the Berlin hotel. We said, hey, this place on the rooftop with a view on the Tiergarten into the zoo, this would be a place to really create something which should be done for Berlin. We designed the hotel with Studio Eislinger, and Werner always told me about Dschungel, which was a famous bar back in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s. Nick Cage, David Bowie, the west part of Berlin. And the Dschungel was not far away from our hotel. And the theme of our hotel, the narrative was urban jungle anyways. So it came all together when we were 6 months before the opening. We said this bar has to be called Monkey Bar while we were looking at the orangutans down in the zoo. And it became a thing by itself. It was Monkey Bar today is totally different from what Werner and I back then visionized. We thought it would be a cultural spot for only the intellectual Berliners coming, and now it's like a place where like people stand in line, and it's a place for everyone. It became a place which is very democratic because it's touristic on the one hand, but it's also local on the other hand. And
fully agree.
So that was
we all go there. Yeah.
That was our first big success, also financially, because the bar is always full. It's jam-packed. But then
it's sad that they have to close that early for the rooms that are below. So that's a classical moment because that was
now until 2:00 on Thursday, exactly. Friday, Saturdays. But we could open much longer. But then the next phase of the bars came when I lived in Hamburg for a long time, of course, and I became friends with Rainer and Jörg. Rainer was the founder of Café Paris, and Jörg, of course, the famous Jörg Meyer, Bar Le Lion. We sat down many times, and then we said, hey, it would be so cool to do a nice new bar concept. And Jörg helped us a lot to create the first Boilerman bar in Hamburg, in Altes Hafenamt, but also other bar concepts, which are, I would say, the relatives of the Boilerman bar. We did in Zurich, Langstrasse, the Cinchona bar. We did later on the a companion bar in Florence together.
Amazing hotel, Florence. So many, you walk in, so many corners, so much to see. It's sometimes then you have this courtyard, the library, and amazing, really.
Yeah, I love it too.
I could have stayed an hour, but I had to move because there's so much to see, and I have not even started touching things. You know, I'm one of these guys who always buys things. It was amazing, really good hotel.
Next time you stay longer. But Jörg was also, was a very important stepstone and sparring partner and friend to also be, self-critical about what we are doing, because Jörg knows 1,000 times more about bars than I or we do. And he taught us, and he was also quite tough with us by saying, no, I'm getting involved here, but I will not get involved in that because this is not according to my philosophy. And he has a very strong point of view on what a cool bar means and what not.
If I listen to all this, and before we tap in a bit on what you do, because time is running, at what stage did you need my fellow former boss, Sébastien Bazin? At what point, when I hear all this, I can write a book and say you don't need it, but there must be a moment where you said, "Okay, we're growing." What made you? Why this partnership then?
Well, before we met Sébastien, we already had a common. I was running the company, and I was never scared about what we have done until then. I was always very, very I had so much fun and energy, and I was at some point I realized, okay, now we have done, I don't know, 8 to 10 hotels. We have this and that hotel in the pipeline. We are approaching slowly almost 1,000 employees within our company. And I asked myself, and also my shareholders, my friends by then, how shall we proceed? How shall we continue this? How can we make sure that this success can stay alive? A brand which has a certain value by now. We are slowly but surely getting older. Do we want to take the risk to give it to all of our children, and then they get into fights, and I don't know what's going to happen. That was one of the things. How can we make sure that the brand will stay alive for a long time? And number two, honestly, I also wanted to cash out a little bit, because until then I didn't have the money to say I'm financially kind of independent or can do some new things. So these were the drivers. And then we had a short list of companies where we said, this would be nice to hook up with them because they may understand our philosophy. We can create synergies. And on that list was not Accor, for sure.
Yeah, based on what you have said the last 30 minutes, that is absolutely true.
No, it was like a list only of mostly luxury hotel groups. And we already started having some talks. But then it was another coincidence. I was in Berlin. We were just about to make the last finishes of our hotel. And then I got a phone call from a friend from Accor who said, hey, there's the new CEO of Accor, Sébastien Bazin, in Berlin, and he heard about this hotel in about 25 hours. Can we pass by quickly and you can give him a site inspection? And then Sébastien came, not alone. He typically French with his whole entourage. But we came along from the spot. I liked him very much, and he liked what he saw. He was making a bit fun by saying, well, this hotel is not finished yet, because, we kept a lot of, rough walls and no suspended ceilings. And at that moment, we had an artist from Japan, Yoshi, who made some graphics, and he was the guy who did all the signage by doing sitting there for 3 months and putting really fantastic drawings onto the walls. And so Sébastien said, I love it, let's stay in touch. And it was probably 6 months or a year later where he gave me a phone call and said, Christoph, can we talk? Because we are trying to change Accor. We are very intrigued by lifestyle. We already bought into Mama Shelter. Come to Paris and let's have a talk. And then I slowly but surely realized how interesting Accor in reality is for us as a small player, because we can create literally so many synergies. And I also felt that Sébastien really liked what we did, and he understood also that it's important to keep a firewall between the big Accor organization and us as very anarchistic individual players.
Rebels, yeah.
Yeah, and yes, and we started with 30%, which we sold to Accor, but he always, and his colleagues, there was already Gorav back then. He was the chief development officer of the company. I don't know if you ever met each other. He was also a very important person by keeping that soul of 25 hours over the course of time. But we already had you said we sell first 30% and another 20% in 2019, and the rest was supposed to be sold actually in this year, 2023. No, next year. But then Accor already had some plans to create that new lifestyle organization, which later on was called Ennismore. It happened 1 year ago. So they wanted to accelerate the deal in order to make sure that everything is in that Ennismore umbrella, and that's what happened. And I have to say,
and you could see your impact on that, because really you changed. I mean, I was 18 years with Accor. I made my whole career there. Yes, that's my home. That's my home crew.
Okay.
Now I'm at the social hub and quite happy, because that is as well a bit more rebellious, I would say. But seeing this change as well from the inside was amazing, because we were great in doing copyable hotels that made amazing RevPARs and amazing margins. That's what Accor is great at. And then came these players. First, Mama Shelter. I'm a big fan of the Mama Shelter in Paris, because it's far off the city and they create a very payable atmosphere with a very unique style. And then 25 hours, and I said, man, that's the future. Now with this Ennismore thing, I'm already it's 3 years that I'm gone, 4 years nearly. So I am not really in that Ennismore vibe, but I really can see the sense of what's happening there, and why you and 25 hours played a major role in shifting that from you have to wear suit and tie and be a French dressed man into you can be more than successful with your individuality, which is amazing. So yeah, kudos on that. I always say I would have had that earlier. When I had my little Mercure, everybody looked at me strangely when I said we have to organize quiz nights for the neighbors, and now I look like quiz nights is nothing special anymore. Yeah. Hey, if you look into the future, and I mean, apparently you have done that in the past, and you have had the right visions. What do you think lays ahead? I mean, probably not enough time to take it all. But I work for a concept, the Social Hub, which is already very hybrid, very focused on that word community, which has never been or never has had the biggest factor in my career. What do you see in the future up for the classic hotel versus the new players on the beach I
don't know. I first of all, I think what Ennismore has done with this collection of really different brands and lifestyle brands, I'm also 1 year after the joint venture has happened, I'm pretty optimistic that this will become a major player in the hospitality industry. It is already, but I think there's still a lot of development potential worldwide. And I strongly believe in it, and I still work for this new organization, and I'm happy to do so. I was not sure how it will feel, when you're not the owner anymore. But it's good. I like it. First of all, I can still take care a little bit of the 25 hours, which makes me happy. But I can also see and learn a lot from how that shifts into a new level. So that's one thing, which I believe as a future trend will stay, and it will become stronger. But I also believe that, going back to the roots, becoming more humble, becoming maybe more simple, the definition of luxury, a new definition of luxury, that will be very important in the future. It will be a necessity, I believe, because I also think that hospitality has to shift into something more careful, into something more sustainable, into something more local, which is, of course, a contradiction by itself, because how can you become more local while you want to, develop hotels all over the world? I think that simplicity of luxury could be something interesting, also as a concept for hotels. And I'm not talking about, white hotels or hotels which are boring. I think you can combine it with a certain kind of design and also, of course, F&B concept. There's a lot of trends in the F&B world which we can take and become really local and become more simple and don't have the whole range of everything. I believe that education is a key factor of success in the future. And I'm not
Changing
only
the societies where you are, indeed. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And also thinking about how you can create a environment within your own company of for the employees, which has much more value than today. How can you become the educator for people who don't have a chance to go to the super nice hospitality schools in this world, but how can you create something within your own environment to make people or to give people a chance to participate in the growth, to participate in a career? There's so many people who don't have a chance to get that proper life education, and why not starting in hospitality with it? Because there's a few businesses in this world, only a very few sectors of work where you collect so many people and so many different countries and so many different cultures in one spot that it might be quite interesting to really work on that and see how you can combine that with a very open-minded educational program.
Yeah, and you can make a difference there. I mean, I worked in Africa as well. I worked with people who have never used fork and knife before, and then you ask them to serve food, and there you could see a mind shift there. I really think that's a great approach. Hey, and for yourself, you already said you don't only work a bit for Ennismore. I mean, you're hanging around with the big dogs all the time, flying left and right to creating new projects. That's quite impressive. But on yourself, you have your own little, I don't want to say side projects because it sounds shady, but it's like you have your own still business that you fulfill. Can you tell us a bit more about, I hope I'm saying that, Bikini Island and Mountain Hotel? What is that?
That's the name of the brand. And it comes from, it's a bit... Maybe we were a little bit romantic, my old shareholder colleagues and myself, when we started to sell the shares to Accor. We realized that we had a really good time together and that we became friends and that we had a very, nice and also successful time together. And so we said, why don't we create another company, which is a bit more relaxed, which is a bit more about leisure. We said, okay, maybe one of those properties could be also a hotel where we can spend time on ourselves, and maybe we have a nice restaurant, and maybe that hotel doesn't make a lot of money, but it gives us a lot of pleasure by being there. We haven't found that place yet, by the way, but we found a first hotel on Mallorca, which we bought with some other partners and converted it within 6-8 months with one of our favorite designers, 3 Meter, who we did a lot of 25hours hotels together. And it's been a big success since the opening, except the pandemic, of course. But we are now in year 4, I believe. And we are slowly but surely shifting into other destinations. We bought another hotel in Zermatt, Switzerland, which has to be converted. It's an existing old hotel called Antares right now, but it will be a Bikini Mountain hotel in a couple of years from now. And we have a few more projects coming up slowly but surely. And so this is another business. And yeah, I look around, but I'm not. We have to see.
Yeah. I mean, so better keep an eye on what you're doing. That's what you say. But I'm saying it. So I can promise you everybody in the hospitality industry will keep a very good eye and good look on what you're up to. I already like the name Bikini Island and Mountain Hotel. It's a hotel for everybody. Yeah. Well, I'm a more island guy. But anyway, that's amazing. Hey, cool.
Sometimes we have mountains and islands at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. It's perfect for those guests who are booking in a hotel at Alexanderplatz and then saying, "Hey, I cannot see the sea."
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, if before we go to our little final round, is there any good books or any recommendations that you would say if you want to read something? Grab these book off the shelf. I already know that Gepäckschein 66, which is a very vintage book, I know, but is there anything else that you would recommend to people?
I became a big fan of Florian Ilias. Florian Ilias he was the writer of Generation Golf, which I never even read. I started with 1913 and Liebe in Zeiten des Hasses. I don't know the English version of it.
We'll put it in the comments. It's Liebe in Zeiten des maybe Love in Times of Hate.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about the time. I mean, 1913 tells this the story or the history of the year where in 1914 everything has changed. I mean, the world fell apart kind of in that phase, and similar in the phase of in the 20s into the early 30s, and Love in Time of Hate is telling little beautiful stories of less and more well-known people, cultural people from Vienna, from Berlin, from Paris, and it's just wonderful to read this book, and it inspires me also on how to do a hotel, how to tell the story of hotels, because Stefan Zweig and Sigmund Freud or Picasso have been people who were a big inspiration for hotels, and these books I can really recommend. It's just very, very interesting, yeah. And Florian Illis.
We'll take it in the note. We'll post it obviously in the notes as well, because you just said that this is the inspiration for the storytelling part of 25 hours. And I have to say, even when I just passed through a 25 hours until today, I still grab your little newspaper, which is exactly what I love. I love to touch things and read it, so probably I'm a bit off the normal techie parts of me. Mm-hmm. Hey, Christoph, every of us hosts has his little own problem. So my problem is always at the end, I have a quick short fire round, a couple of questions where you tend to answer in just one word. The first one is going to be very simple because you basically already answered it, but I'm still going to ask it. And we're going to start right now. The first question is it wine or gin tonic?
Because of the tonic.
No, because of the wine. You are the wine expert.
Okay.
Huh?
Yes. No, I like gin, but tonic. But I love your answer. Yeah. Thank you. Because of the wine. Mm.
But I can see that we still can have a night out with at least gin. And we can spare the tonic. That's okay.
Yeah.
Beach or snow?
That I stopped having those discussions. I love both. And that's why we have a company called Island and Mountains. I'm looking forward to the snow right now, and maybe there's a small tendency of loving the mountains a bit more than the beach, but everything at its time.
Love it. You would catch me rather with the beach. Tank top shorts is more than wrapping up. Good books or good podcasts?
Maybe the combination. I love audiobooks right now a lot.
Yeah.
When I do driving, it's a very meditative situation. I just don't know exactly if in your brain the same thing happens when you listen to an audiobook than if you read a book. Because if you read a book, your own world starts, you create your own world around the content of the book. And I don't know exactly what happens in your brain when you listen to an audiobook. I just know that it can be very smoothing and relaxing, but of course also podcasts.
I agree fully, especially learning.
Yeah, there's one next to Smack, of course. Coming back to Florian Ilias, he has a beautiful podcast with Giovanni Di Lorenzo, which is called Augen zu. It's a Zeit podcast, and they talk about different painters of different periods of times, from Andy Warhol to Botticelli, and to really, really nice, beautiful stories behind the painters.
And keep our audience at Smack, but if you're into something else, then we will recommend it.
It's not
far distance to Smack.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, theoretical learning or practical experience?
Practical experience.
That was the clearest answer you gave so far, so that's amazing. Chess or poker?
Chess.
Nice. Farm or boat?
Farm. I get seasick on boats.
Swaben hearts.
Yeah.
We're all agriculturists at the end.
Yeah.
And then last one, food or fitness?
Food.
I love it.
Actually, I mean, I would love to say both, because I'm a strong believer that you have to work for your food. It feels better if you have done something and then you can enjoy food. But if I had to make a choice, it would be always food.
We in Swabia always say 2 beer is as well a dinner, so that's why you still have to do sports even though you don't eat. So I fully agree. Christoph, it was more than a pleasure. I have to repeat that. I'm an amazing fan. I was gifted to have so many great people on this podcast, but I was really looking forward to that one because you're an inspiration to why I'm in this industry. Giving the fact that you're from the same area than me makes it even stronger. So thank you very much for being on Smack and for being here for the last 45 minutes.
Thank you for the nice conversation. And I hope I will be able to meet you soon at Social Hub, which I also believe is a great concept.
I can't wait. Probably we find a spot when in Florence. So I'll make a side inspection in your property, and then
we have dinner at neither Social Hub nor the 25 hours, but at the Trattoria Sostanza. It's my favorite place in Florence, and I'm sure you would love it.
Okay, we have to finish that off before. But hey, is that the spot where you have the bar in the front and then a very old area in the back? Because I think.
And in the very back, you have the kitchen,
yes,
the open kitchen with the very simple fireplace.
We went there last time we were in Italy with our team, and it was amazing. Yeah. But we'll go there again. Yes, thanks, please. Christoph, for being here.
Take care. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
That's it for this episode, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to share your thoughts on this episode and everything else that is going on at Smack with us by checking out our website at smack.media or connect with us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Instagram. We'll see you next time.
Hi guys, thanks for tuning in again. If you'd like to hear more from us, check this out over here. And if you'd like to stay up to date on all things Smack related, follow us below. Thanks and see you soon.